of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Tristano, Chapter 17. With luck? Whoa now! You've met All Might! He was here! Leading the first run of adults, 10 in total, with 4 of them consisting of the 3 local pros and Inko, Hitoshi, and Izuku, after the pair had gushed about their exciting encounter, were assisting. The iris-haired boy's mother was quietly sat in the cafe eating a meal and chatting to Dabi. Shouta sighed. Hadn't he definitely said, no chit-chat? Could he technically expel the starry-eyed people, who were all just a few months older than him, from his lessons? How would that work? It's not as though he could ban them from the area, was it? No, that was irrational, and whether he liked it or not, their presence was being noticed by the criminal element that loitered around every other corner, and so, for the greater good, you just have to suffer their rapid questions, illogical requests, and awkward attempts at, for whatever reason, trying to steal more of his time. Why would he go out and drink with them when it was actually poison? When would we have time to watch a movie, even if he'd wanted to, other than on a Sunday? He'd never understand the socializing practices expected of his year group and probably never would. Hell, why the pros weren't content to simply hang out at the establishment in the evenings, which they did every other Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday as a group or in a pair, he didn't know. Which in turn raised his own question whilst he moved the group into stretching their hamstrings, his right brow cocking at the 3 people a little too close to his personal space. Don't all of you hero types know each other? Because out of anyone that the Tots had loudly and proudly told about their special guest, he'd not expected Loud Cloud and Present Ike to flail or Midnight to squeal and nearly faint in the same dramatic manner as Izuku. What? The costume wearers got in unison. Surely you're all, I don't know, in some kind of syndicate or something? I mean, it'd be irrational for you all to have separate agencies that function completely independently when so many criminal organizations operate like businesses with clear lines of communication running from the kingpins at the top down to... He cut off, his eyes narrowing. The blonde was gawping at him. The sun-kissed man looked sheepishly pensive. The female associate, however, looked as though someone had just stolen her whip. You're kidding. He deadpanned before dropping inward lower, his left knee touching the floor. Lunge, his students skipping and trying to mimic with a few laughing, flailing, and retrying, whilst his assistants jogged around to aid their balance. And they'd been training with him for a month now, and based on their progress, he was sure that most of them, even Mimi-chan, as she liked to be called, her 58-year-old form determined, could handle it. Anyone who fell down could be helped back up, couldn't they? Although he was struggling not to be floored by the shambles pro-hero society seemed to be in. Why are you all talking to each other? Because really? Really? Well, you see... Loud Cloud tried, his form a little unsteady. His tongue flicked out to touch his top lip as he concentrated. We have, intranets and data encrypted message boards, and the police are always... Not having a standard, easy-to-access form of communication is... irrational! Present Mike cut in with a grin, his brows wagging. Ridiculous, he countered, his head shaking ruefully as he easily returned to a stand. How does he do that? He heard a few of the older people balk, before dropping his right knee to the astroturf. Do you not have a union? Why not have delegates or utilize sidekicks to convene for weekly or monthly meetings? He pushed. How do you know that you're not barging into someone else's investigation? Why wouldn't you pool your resources to take down bigger threats? I mean, he tried to laugh because it was ludicrous. You're not all leaving the biggest threats for All Might at the top 5 pros to handle, surely. Watching as the 3 paled before their foreheads turned blue, their temples veritably littered with sweat drops, Shouta pulled himself flawlessly back into his stance. Oh, my legs are burning, but I'm doing it! I'm never felt my life! It was nice to see so many 40-plus-year-olds getting confidence and getting healthier, at least. He couldn't help his mouth releasing a sigh at the pros so shamefacedly standing before him, though. How do all of you function? He muttered whilst reaching his arms high above his head to wiggle his fingers. Is
Is this, I don't know, an ego thing? Do the opinion polls and whom arrests the most villains with the least property damage really matter more than cooperating? He furthered the situation so much worse than he'd feared. Is making money and having a fan base truly more important than working together? He asked quietly, his heart dropping a touch. He didn't want the children he'd become so fond of entering in for such a lifestyle if that was the case. Is competing with each other worth people losing their lives and livelihoods? Shit. When none of them answered, he briefly closed his eyes before leading the group through a repetition of an overhead tricep stretch into a double V before easing into an upside-down cactus stretch, his head slowly rolling to ease any tension building in their necks and shoulders. You know, to hear someone say it out loud, it doesn't sound too good, does it? The bow staff wielder murmured. I guess that, we all get caught up in what's happening within our agency's territories that we... Well, I didn't really think about all of that, he admitted. But sure, it's not perfect. We're not perfect. But we still do good, you know? We still save people. I'm not debating that, Shouta replied before bringing them all back to their resting positions. All I'm saying is that, to me, it seems like a wasted effort. Hey now! President Mike cut in, his lips turning from a worried pout to a little frown. You're not a pro! You didn't even attend a pro hero course, so... I don't need to be any of those things to observe your society and see the flaws in it. He countered, but not unkindly. Whether he'd liked it or not, he'd become almost fond of the well-meaning, hard-working trio. Let me put this another way, he offered before slowly moving into the first kata he'd taught them all. Let's imagine that you're all firefighters, he said, his movements graceful and flowing, his head cocking at Toshi, before gesturing to the middle-aged man who seemed out of puff. The kid skipped to the drink station for him. Such a smart boy. I'd love to see you in uniform, Shouta. Midnight Bird, one of those opal blue eyes winking at him while she licked her lips. Ugh! Let's also imagine that you've been sent to a mountain range dotted with forest fires. He carried on. He'd learned early on that ignoring her advances was for the best. You get there, you tackle the fire that you could see, and then what? He asked. Do you pack up and go home even though you know there are several other fires elsewhere? He furthered, his eyes narrowing when the two men went to say something. He wasn't finished after all. Would you yell at other firefighters for trying to help you? Would you allow other firefighters to chase you away? Would you not ask for helicopters, drones, and people who can fly to assess the other fires so you could rush to the next one? Blinking it in, their eyes widening, the heroes looked to each other, their expressions a little guilty. It's not as though we wouldn't want to work with anyone else, Loud Cloud admitted. I mean, don't keep information to ourselves, it's just... That the people at the top are stopping you or don't want to play along? That they'd make it difficult for you? Shouta quipped, his right leg executing a kick 2 or 3 inches higher than what he'd challenged them all to do before. Why should you let that stop you from trying or pushing the issue with other agencies in your area? My Joe! It's not that simple! The jade-eyed man said, his own leg just about hitting the height he'd set, his grin a little straight. Of course it is, he snorted. Do you think that I've allowed the Starbucks 4 streets away or the Panda Express 10 minutes from here or the McDonald's they're going to open on the other side of this apartment complex to stop me from running my business? He asked. Sure, I won't be communicating with them directly, and God knows they wouldn't ask me to elaborate on anything, but they could entice my customers away. They could try to bully me or intimidate me. He shrugged. But that's not going to stop me from being here and looking after the people who've chosen to help and look after me by attending these sessions, eating my food, and offering their time on our contacts board. He stated, what I want to do is more important than any obstacles in my way. Yep, you tell them, Aizawa, son! But don't you worry, those franchise punks won't have the guts to tackle you, I'm sure! Kohaku-san, the fish-featured salaryman, tittered smugly. I'd probably feel sorry for them if they tried, because you and your cafe are far more than just a soulless building and an owner that sells good wares, you know? Kohaku, we wouldn't let them try to mess with Aizawa-san, eh? His older, balder friend. It was thanks to them that he'd even thought of running an adult class, wasn't it? Chuckled, his arms confidently following the punching motions with a tenacious grin and strong posture. You're both very kind, thank you, he replied in turn with a short thankful bow. Now then, He called to the group at large. "Today we're going to practice takedowns, so get into your pairs and threes," he instructed before walking away from the pros. Maybe, with any luck, they'd reflect on what he'd said and try to make some changes themselves. However, if things within the hero community didn't alter for the better, well, he'd have to try and prepare his plucky little study group for such power struggles, wouldn't he? The next generation, he knew, was very much worth fighting to make such alterations for.
"This is stupid. You're an idiot. What the fuck are you doing?"
He had been stood at his apartment's door, his keys, wallet, and oldest game controller shoved into the pocket of his oversized, relatively lightweight hoodie for about 10 minutes now. He hated the heat. He hated summer. He should just go back to his room. Why wasn't he going back to his room? It was 9:37. It'd take him 2 bus rides and a 10-minute walk to get to the Noranaka Cafe. If he left now, he'd get there for just under 10. Tabi, if that was his real name, if this wasn't some kind of trick, said it'd be quiet then. The buses would be relatively quiet too, since the majority of children and adults would have started school and work by now. And he'd not had breakfast, not through nervousness, not through anxiety, thank you, yet either. The images of food that he'd found related to the Noranako, middle schoolers and social media went hand in hand, didn't they? Looked admittedly pretty good. The other teen, if this wasn't going to be the clusterfuck he was predicting, had told him all about the dishes he preferred. He could really go for some tamagoyaki right about now. Sighing, his eyes screwing shut before they snapped open, he was Shigaraki Tomura. God damn it, he wouldn't be thwarted by something so simple as going outside to get something to eat and play a game or two. All for One's secret successor wrenched open the door, walked through it, locked it, and stormed toward the nearest stairwell.
"You'll be in for a fucking big surprise if you've tried to trick me, Dobby,"
he muttered to himself, the hood of his charcoal gray sweatshirt disguising his head and shadowing his face before he shoved his hands resolutely into his black jeans pockets and stalked out of the fancy security guard monitored lobby. This was a mistake. This was ridiculous! So why was he already stomping towards the bus station? Diligently wiping down the service bar before moving onto the smart till, the cafe now virtually empty, Shouta found himself humming to the soft jazz playlist he'd loaded into the sound system. Present mic and LoudCloud had linked into the cafe's formerly disused speakers. Mimi-chan and her friends, however, were still happily chatting in the booth furthest away from the door. They'd asked if they could hold their knitting circle there, and he, of course, had granted their request. He might have let slip about a young pregnant woman who'd stopped by from time to time, who was new to the area, too. For she'd told him when he'd found her watching his study group, her smile fond despite the tears lacing her lashes, that her fiancé had recently been demoted, and she'd had to reduce her shifts at the store she worked at for the baby's sake. He'd not related those personal details to the lovely older ladies, of course, but he'd hinted just enough that the group of 4 women were now diligently creating baby clothes, blankets, and toys for the woman's infant. He was to donate them to her free of charge on their behalf when the time was right. He was hoping instead to introduce them all to each other. Having 4 grandmothers on hand for help, advice, and support would surely be better than a one-time provision of valuable and adorable resources, wouldn't it? Ding, ding! Looking up from where he'd been running a few calculations through the till's tax collection system, Shouta reverted it to sales mode and regarded the hood-wearing teen who was cautiously looking around the place with a slightly raised brow. Can it be? Good morning and welcome to the Noranaka Cafe, he greeted with a little bow. What can I get you? Slowly turning to him, his head still mostly concealed, the eatery owner could just make out a face behind limp, wavy curls of grayish hair. The younger man, just a few inches shorter than him, let out a huff that sounded too weary for someone of his tender years.
"This is a stupid question,"
the younger man began, his tone quiet and dejected.
"But is Dobby here?"
Feeling a pleased smile spread his lips, the raven-haired man nodded. "He's expecting you," he told him warmly, his hand gesturing towards the gaming area where, sure enough, his lodger was lounging in one of the beanbag chairs on his break, his lemonade nearly gone, and his eyes roving over a health and safety manual he'd insisted on reading. Such a good kid. The other almost balked. Oh? Was he just as nervous about this meeting as his employee? He was irrationally cute, wasn't it? That covered countenance snapping to the cat paw dotted area, his form almost uncurling from its stooped posture. Would you like anything to eat or drink? He reminded, his arm then gesturing to the menu overhead. I'll bring whatever you like over to you if you'd like to go over and get started on a game. The other swallowed, half of his face. Dobby had said that his gaming acquaintance, Tomra, had told him that his quirk had affected his body and made it appear fucked. Flashing at him bewilderedly before he finally looked up to the food and drink listed on the black chalkboard above him.
Tamagoyaki and, he says your lemonade is something that I had to try, so...
He hedged uncertainly. No problem, he returned mildly. What syrup would you like? Most people go for mint, but I have strawberry, apple, and hibiscus. He furthered.
Hibiscus?
The red-eyed Dean muttered.
Yeah, I'll try that, thanks.
He nodded before with a blink. He did get the prices.
So he wasn't lying about you potentially going bankrupt either.
Sniggering despite himself, the action causing the other to relax a little, Shouta shook his head. Bankruptcy is becoming one of his catchphrases, I'm certain, he explained. Please go and make yourself comfortable. He urged. I'll be over with your order in a few minutes. He added, his hands already reaching for the 5th pitcher of lemonade he'd used that day, before adding 2 shots of the syrup he liked to make every other evening, the ingredients left to steep and slow cook overnight, so that they were the perfect consistency in the morning. Then, with the drink met, he hazarded a glance at the first meeting of his young friend, and one of the only people he'd been interested in enough to talk to. With a little more luck, there could be another firm friendship. Potentially more. Dobby's face veritably lit up when he talked to him about this young man, but only time would tell. Forming in his cat-themed cafe, couldn't there? Blinking. He'd been staring at the same sentence for at least 10 minutes. Not because he was nervous, or because he convinced himself that Tomra wasn't coming, thank you. Dobby looked up from the chapter so creatively entitled Food Hygiene 101 to observe a teenager standing next to the other beanbag. Hey, he said, the manual snapping closed. You weren't kidding about your face, huh? He heard himself say, a fair smile pulling his own burnt lips.
You weren't either.
The other blinked, a small chuckle shaking his shoulders.
What happened to you? Were you born in a dumpster fire or something?
That's better than being a living ash pile, he countered, his laugh a little louder this time. You gonna sit down and show me that secret level or what?
You'd like that, wouldn't you little shits?
The slightly shorter male snorted.
Well, there's no turning back now, I guess.
He huffed whilst shoving his hood away and slumping with a sigh into the beanbag opposite the other 16-year-old.
I can't believe that I'm here,
he told himself offhandedly. Yeah, you're disappointed that this isn't a fetish dungeon? He asked, the nervous tension well and truly gone as amused crimson met mirth-glazed turquoise.
I knew you were a perv,
the paler of the pair quipped, his eyes rolling before he carefully pulled out his controller and waved it at him.
Now shut up and load the game already.
Sniggering, Dobby pulled himself into a stand so he could approach the modest setup, his hands reaching to switch on the TV and the console housed in a shelf just behind it. You call me a perv, but you're the one who's staring at me right now, aren't you?
The back of your t-shirt's got a cat on it, that's all.
His fellow gamer quipped before folding his arms and resolutely looking away, one of the framed kitten photos suddenly very interesting. Smirking from where he was still observing the other over his dove gray-colored shoulder. They matched in terms of color schemes. What were the odds? The flame quirk user couldn't help the flood of relief that filled him. As wrong as it was to know that there was someone just as fucked up as him he could see and talk to, it... Well... misery loved company, didn't it?
Thanks for, inviting me and being a real, I guess.
Blinking, his shocked face softening slightly, Dobby allowed a quiet, genuinely pleased sound to escape him. Thank you for coming, he breathed, his attention returning to the screen whilst he changed the HDMI settings. Maybe, with a little luck. 1,000 yen says that the secret level you can't shut up about sucks, though. Neither of them would have to stay miserable for long.